So I was looking for a short, and this is Simon with TRADENPERFORM Coaching. Just doing a quick trade review. Past performance not indicative of future results. I'm talking about a setup in CL. So I was trying to explain to one of the members earlier. I'm just going to go through the trade step by step. So this was my yellow zone, right? From the day, if you look on the larger time frame chart, which is this right here. Wrong product. Hold on, I will find it for you. Nope. I know why. I have it over here. Excuse me. Let's see what's going on. There we go. So I have that hidden. Okay, so this is a 5-minute. No. Wow. Too many screens, too many charts. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. Okay. There's the 5-minute chart, right? This is a yellow zone. They're important. I expect support, resistance in those locations, right? I'm trying to get, so I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, what would it look like if we get a roll to the downside? So we pushed, right? And we went through this long consolidation through here, right? Which often, not always, right? Which often, but not always, leads to a roll to the downside, right? So in putting that together, as everyone knows, I got stopped earlier in the day on a CL trade about right in here somewhere, I think, right? So as we push out, I'm sitting there going, well, what's my next trade? And I've been very, very patient. I only had one stop. So I'm looking. So the first thing that catches my eye, see on this big push, it's the single biggest delta wave to the upside on a 5-range chart. It's hard to argue with it. You can go all the way back through the whole 24 hours. That's the biggest push. So that coincides with this bar, I'll draw it better, right here inside the yellow zone. Point number 2, we close underneath that, right? You'll see we close underneath at 943, got an immediate long liquidation back to the light blue zone, which is a mediocre support zone. Sometimes it holds, sometimes it doesn't. Excuse me while I take off my jacket here. Okay, moving forward from that. So now I'm going, okay, I'm looking for a short. I was getting frustrated through here, and I couldn't really figure out what the market wanted to do. And what I wanted was a up fractal, and then I wanted to close behind it. And see, it worked over here the first time, but over here it just barely closed. Like it closed above by 1 bar, then it closed back in, I would say right here. And it went down and then immediately came back up. Like you had to be pretty Johnny on the spot to get that trade, right? But then, right, we make one more push, and this push right here was interesting to me. Why was it interesting to me? So this push was the first close back in, right? And was the first close back in to the range. This bar, this green bar, was the second close back into this range. Those both should have generated short squeezes, right? But what did we do? On this push up, see how once we got underneath here, this was the, even though it wasn't a speed bar like this was the fractal, this was the down bar with a fractal, right? So then we clearly closed above it, and you would think, hey, second time back into the biggest base, we're going to push to the highs, is what you would think. Instead, what happened was right here on this bar right here at 12:33 Eastern, right? This bar closed back in, and I kind of looked at that and said, well, that's kind of interesting. That shouldn't have happened, right? Once we got above this should have taken off. And I had one of 2 stops I could choose from. The tightest stop, meaning I could have chosen 32 cents or 33 cents right behind the zone, or the swing high of the day, depending on how I trade and which poison I chose. So what I chose is I wanted to try to stay in the trade, and it's been kind of a blah day. I went with a half-size position on both my tiny account and on the large account. And I said that should roll down, and then my plan was to add to this, not in the small account because I was already down and it was a so-so, right, on a 50-60 back. And so That's the close. That's the backside went right into the 50-60. And then you got it a little push down. And then I was left with a dilemma. Really, I didn't want... And so this is where, when it's choppy, you can get kind of screwed up on this trade, right? You really didn't want the bar to close back into this bar, and it did, right? So now this is where it becomes a little bit of an art form. I'm in a resistance zone. I've had an over-under on a key location. We traded above, we traded below, and that often sets a roll to the downside. CL is relatively extended, and I thought, hey, this could set a roll for a push to the downside, right? So, and again, I was actually not in the office. I was managing this remotely. So what I did was I just said, if we're not going to break above this swing high over here, I'm just going to stay with it, right? So then I start to, it's taking forever. I finally lose patience, and we finally creep back down to this 57.08 right here, and I'm like, I can't tell if it's going to break or not because there's a little uptrend, fractal uptrend right here that needs to get broken. And basically my thought was, well, if we close below and we trap back in, they're going to stop me right away and I'm going to get stopped. And I'm trying to squeeze back some P&L, particularly in that smaller account. I'm not having a horrible down day there, but my first trade was full size and I took a larger than normal stop there. So it's not a horrible day or anything like I'm like, oh my God, but I didn't get hooked up on NQ, I didn't get hooked up on ES, and I didn't get hooked up on CL, which is rare for me. So I'm like, okay, I only have one tiny contract there. I'm going to take it off. And in my larger account, I'm like, I got cushion there. I'll let it roll. So when this rolls down in the larger account a little bit more, I think I took half off over here, right? Why? That's the swing low. And then I did not close out the position down here, and they brought it back, right? And I knew if they trapped back in, and I said, if they trap back in, so here's what the problem was. If we trap back into this bar, see that, which occurred right actually here, that would, and I said option B, right? I kind of laid out what the opposite side of that argument was on the Slack channel. I came in here and I said, and then I said, okay, so I went through the whole explanation. I said, so that is slow-mo of how it's supposed to work. And that's a great setup, by the way. It's most time said, so stop to break even on balance in the trading account, flat on the tiny account. That is a great setup, just how it goes. The flip side, not the lip side, the flip side of the argument is this. Trap back above the last green bar with a down fractal. That would be this bar over, actually, it was this bar over here now that I think about it. Okay. And I went on to say, I literally laid out the formula, and I said, trap and shoot the range on the close. So look what the market actually did. Okay, so I was short. My stop's sitting up here, and I left by this point. I wasn't at home, and I wasn't at the office. Stop is sitting there, right? So now look at the trade. Here's the biggest push down of the afternoon, right? What do you not expect? What do you not expect on the biggest push down? You do not expect that we'll trap back into balance, right? Instead, what was it? Balanced day, broke balance, closed underneath, trap back in. Had I been here, I would have either covered this bar or this bar, and I would have taken all of it. Ended up taking all of it profitably as it was. It closed it all out right over here for me automatically. Right? Remember the small account I was already done at 57.08 or 09 for a relatively disappointing trade. And ideally, what I would have done is gone long here, stopped here, right, which would have been within my 20 ticks, and then I would have gotten paid on the push back to the other end of the range. It was a ho-hum day, but this was not a great setup. So this setup, if we had been pushed down, let's say we were down a 1.5, 2 points, and we trapped like that, all over it for the flip back to the other side creates great short squeezes. But in this particular case, my thinking was because we were all the way up, we come back to retest, right? Retest prior day's highs, and I figured if we got underneath this little lip right here, everything triggered the way I wanted to. We got underneath the big wave. I figured this long liquidation could come, maybe a backside test that doesn't close back in, and then flush, and I end up with a 50 or 60 tick push to the downside, right? Why is that important? The why is always very, very critical. Why did I just not take the whole trade off over here? And there's a reason for it. Okay, you can't, or at least I can't, most traders can't be a perfect trader for every market, right? And everyone has a different opinion. I could have made, as I did, I could make an argument for CL's long, you're looking for the trap back in, take it the other way. And Peter, as Peter said in the room earlier, he thinks we're going 57.75 or 58, which is fine. I have no problem with it, right? I don't care where the market goes, frankly, right? But this setup at the top of a rotation, right? When I get all this and then I get this first leg of a breakdown, often ends up looking like this, right? Where we get all this, I understand this took place in Asia, but it often leads, like if you look at this trade right here, where my entry would have been, let's see if I would have had an entry. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I would not have had my favorite entry. I would have had a short. Oh, no. Okay, so I wouldn't have taken this. The stop would have been too big, but this would have been the initial entry. What I would have wanted would have been a green bar with a close above, close back in for the short, which is essentially what I had today, right? And that often will lead to a huge rotation down. So like let's pretend we closed above and I actually ended up shorting this bar on the close back in, right? So I would have 57.48 for 55.04. So almost a 44 tick trade in this area, right? Although I don't trade Asia, right? Or it could have looked like this quite easily, right? Where you see pre-market where we got up here. So I want to show you this, right? So, okay, again, this didn't set up the way I wanted to. You would have had to just go with the fractal trendline break, which is over here to the left. But you'll see even over here, see how this was the last close? You should never close back into this bar, right? So what you ended up with is a fractal trendline break, trap back into this bar. So hypothetically, I'm actually short on this bar, but either one would have done. The stop would have gone up here, so I would have had to adjust size and hope for the 50-60. But you often end up with breaks that look like that, right? Which means they end up going for, which by the way, that was the break for 100 ticks that everyone was upset about. That trade set up really nicely. If you look at it from how that trade went, we were already in a downtrend from earlier in the evening. This is the biggest push to the upside. If we draw that out, was right here, right? We had to get underneath that, and you can see once we got underneath, if you draw a line, once you got underneath that biggest push, which was over here at 57, it was bye-bye time. And even if you entered as late as 57, it still dropped all the way down to what our target was, which was 55. I think eventually dropped to 55.20, right? Because that's the open of the U.S. session. And then 55.16 to 55.20 was our ultimate goal. And if you see over here, it's set up again. See this? This is the reason why I keep taking the trade, right? Biggest push, right? If you look, biggest push. I know if I get underneath that push, really good chance of a roll to the downside. And then if you look, when we got up on top there, because we were short in this case, right? We're looking to get above the last push. So if you look, this is my favorite entry. It's a speed bar with a fractal above, right? So this is my last fractal with a green bar with a downside fractal. This is a speed bar down with an upside fractal, right? So if you look, no matter how you slice and dice this ended up, which it was, my entry at 55.16, right? Then I drew back the 50.60, which we pushed right into, right? We then had closed above this fractal, so you could have gotten a secondary entry, right? Or you could have claimed it closed above that fractal. Again, I think the swing is more important. And then what am I targeting? The first thing I want, once I'm short up here, is I want to close back into the top of this rotation. See how we're not closing in? It's right here. See this? But when we close back in, I've got a big clue right there, right? So again, it triggers underneath the last fractal up on this push-up. That's another trade. You could technically move your stop down up to 56.20, and you remember that was also a white zone, and that's what unleashes that monster roll down to 55.20, and then we actually took it the other way, right? And then see this trap down here? That had ended up being the opposite picture of what we had at the bottom today. See how this is on a huge stretch and it was in a key area, right? It was a white, if you remember, this was the white zone in this area. So see this giant push down there? It's the biggest delta push So it's all the way back over here at 7 in the morning. Like it's been hours and they finally make a big push at the low, right? So then you're looking at this and you go, this is the last speed bar with a fractal pointing to the downside. We close back in. I'm going to actually say it's on this bar right here. The entry's here. The next part of that entry comes on the first 50-60 back, which occurs here. And now, this is where it's really freaking important that you understand structure and where you are on the chart. We are way stretched down here, right? They've just made the biggest push down. And I know that if I can get above this point, right? I know if I can get above this point, I should be able to trigger a squeeze to the upside. So look how it's developing. Here's the first close above. Ha ha ha, we're going to pull you back to the 50-60 retrace. Everyone with a tight stop gets stopped out. Smart guys are actually adding at the 50-60 retrace and they're stopping out on a new low, right? So they've added here, right? And if you remember, I actually was late and didn't add till over, where did I add on this trade? I either was long here or I was long here. I know 55.33 or 34 was my entry. Somewhere in there. I remember the day very clearly. All right. And now what am I hoping to do? I want to get above this wave. Second close above that wave. Remember, it started pushing. And I remember because I tried to exit at 55.68. I just missed my 68 exit. It ended up being a fractal to the upside. We got this fractal. This just wasn't a good combo. I just missed it by a penny. It was 67 was the high. I had my limit at 68. Then I moved it to 67. Then I moved to 66. I just couldn't get filled. And I dragged my stop up to 50 cents over here and it just got tagged out. But the whole point is, right, now when you look at this trade and you go, well, Simon, it wasn't that spectacular a trade, right? Well, it just didn't play out. But from a perspective of, hey, could have it played out? Yeah, we're on a stretch. I was in a key area. I got below my last big push up. And I said the flip side of this is if bulls stay in control, right? Bulls stay in control. If they push underneath here, the flip side of that is, as I wrote out, if they trap back in, they're probably taking it to the other end of the range and maybe a new high. I don't know, right? I don't even care. I really don't care what it does. Emotionally, I wanted to get flat for the day. That didn't occur. But from a multiple day long-term strategy, I will take these setups in here, these setups, I will take them all day long when we've closed underneath the biggest wave, because that is where your 100, 150, 200 tick, for everyone who fantasizes about those kinds of moves, that's where those moves come from, okay? And same thing with the long side. If you look at that trade, ultimately, where we were looking long back over here at 55.32, that was back over here, right? So look how that PA actually went through the course of Asia, right? So see how they tried underneath? They got one little point of control underneath in Asia. Closed back in. So if you looked at it again, you worked it all over. They retested the low. Here is the last fractal that broke. See that right here? With the speed bar. So remember, this is frickin' my time. It's 10 o'clock. Okay? We closed back into that bar right here. This is your long, if you're willing to take the long, right? Went through a long consolidation, right? And then what am I trying to do? I'm looking to the left. I'm going, hey, I need to close back into this area right here, right? So if I erase all these lines, oh, I don't want to do that, but I'll draw it up, right? So remember, we were in a white zone. These are the lines from today's charts, right? So I look at this and I go, I need to close back into here. That's kind of my red line, right? I'm coming down here. I don't have a fractal trend line down, nor do I have a fractal speed bar to the downside, but I have one to the upside. I know if I close back into it, I have a good chance of pushing at least back to here, right? So it has to go in stages, right? As we come across, right? See how they make one more push, and this push is almost equal to the last push, but they couldn't break below the low this time. And I get a bunch more pushes to the downside. See how these guys try to push the downside and they got trapped? The backside tested them. Those guys were forced to cover, right? And remember, I'm long. Why am I long? Or at least hypothetically I'm long because this is my last fractal up. Unless I wanted to use this back here, which I wouldn't. They're two different trading times, right? But this one was valid. Closed back in. What do I want to do? I want to enter on this bar. I want to draw my 50-60 back, right? See this? Which ends up being this right here. I want to put my stop right there. And now I'm hoping, just like I was today, if I can draw this, now I'm hoping just like I was today, what is the issue? That is my stop right there, right? So then I'm hoping just like I was today, right? I get this fractal, it closes back in, and now I have to make another trading decision. Remember, that was a Dalton's gap fill. This is just 2 days ago, right? Dalton's gap fill, Dalton's half gap, right? We know those are key support areas, right? So this is particularly important for guys like, well, Derek likes to do a little bit of swing trading. I know, Karen, I'm not sure if you do, and Peter does, right? So watch as that comes across. Now look, first trap back in. They stop everyone by just closing it outside of the trap. Trap back in, right? If you look what this was right here, so see that push? You're like thinking, hey, I got the trap back in. Remember, they're going to come back, and they're going to pop it for a 50 retrace because that's just what CL does. Scare everybody by getting it back below the last strongest push. But if you look here, how would you counter that? Well, here's the biggest push up. Here's the base of the biggest push up. Notice that we don't close underneath. It's going right here, right? So remember, this is 2 in the morning now. You're trying to do your analysis, right? So you're like, hey, we didn't get below the biggest push down. They just tried to close back into the wave, right? They tried to push down. And even if I was super duper late, right? Even if I was super duper late and I was looking for a place to get long, again, I didn't get any fractals to the downside. Randy, are you in the room, buddy? Randy, are you here? Hoping Randy is. Maybe Randy went to get his kids, but he'll watch the video hopefully. Oh, you are there. Okay, so remember the other day I was saying sometimes you don't get the downside fractal for the trap, and you have to go figure it out, right? Because you get this whole push down, you don't get a fractal trend line break or anything else, right? So if you look at this push down, right, and you're going, well, how the heck am I going to get long? Well, see how they closed behind this fractal over here, and then the other one was this one right here. This actually technically triggered a short. I don't know that I would have taken that, but technically it did, right? So you don't want it to close back in, right? And remember, what are we thinking? We've pushed all the way down. Resistance is all the way up, right? And all we've done again, show you this again, all we've done again is this is a 50-60 back, right? So of the 50-60, where do I know they're going to launch? Well, for me, it's either this bar here or I'm going to go long this bar here, which again is very hard for people to do, right? And if I went long up here, what am I expecting again? I'm expecting that they're going to at least attempt a 50-60 back, which they do. You've got to leave some space to add on the trade. Then they push yet again with the biggest push. Now I want you to show you something. See that at 622? How you got the biggest push to the upside right there? See how it came all at the top? You got almost no economy for that push. That made this really important. See I got that red fractal on top? Hold on 1 second. Okay, see how you got that red fractal on top? And see this over here? You don't want to close back into this. So what did it do? There's your blue speed bar right there. There's your close underneath. That technically triggers a short, right? And what do you have to do to make that short roll? You have to get underneath the base of the biggest push to the upside, which, okay, so this was London. This is the end of London push, right? And if you look, in this particular case, you ended up with a fractal trendline break right there, right? So you could have either shorted this, right? You have to plan on a 50-60 back, which it does do. It just does it over to the right, so you would have ended up loading the position in both places, right? And then you want to get underneath the base of your biggest push, which is right here. I'm going to draw a line underneath it. I'm going to color it, just make it really wide so everyone can see it. See that? Closes underneath, right? But remember, we're still down in the hole, right? And we haven't broken anything yet. But you just captured a trade. If you did this right, you ended up being long either here or here, right? And you've rolled up from 55.31 all the way up almost to 55.80, right? And then you've had a change in character. You're like, oh, we could actually roll underneath this biggest push, right? And then when we do, it pushes down. See that? And you might think, right? So what was that, right? So if you look from the base to the high, that was the base, that's the high, and what did it do? Notice that it came right to the big picture 50-60 retrace. See how they tried to close behind that 60 retrace, right? But look what they did when they closed behind that 60 retrace. See this right here? This ended this wave, this one up delta, right? They got behind it. There's no delta on that wave. See that? They closed back in. So how would have you engineered the long on that again? Well, closing into this fractal, see when this broke underneath that biggest wave, that triggered, at least in technically a short, right? Pushed down, they closed back in, that was right after 8 o'clock, and that's what launches it to the upside. And eventually, if you'll follow the bouncing ball through there, it eventually led all the way up. It took a whole 24 hours, right? The whole point is that pattern repeats over and over and over and over and over and over and over, right? And if you kept track of where you were on the daily chart relative to the overnight chart, and what finally popped it was the was going into inventories on Wednesday, right? So we were just chopping and basing in front of that, and then that's what finally released it to the upside, right? And then if you'll look here, this is pretty interesting because it's a reverse of what we normally get. Biggest push to the downside up here on top. See that? And so notice that once they got underneath, they tried to release underneath that wave, but what you wanted really was a big push on top, right? So if you come all the way over to today, that's oil inventories, right? And, oh, wait, here, look on top. See how that became the big, see on top we pushed, it got super choppy in here, there's nothing going on. That's your last push, right? So you want a big push like this to come all the way on top so you can get on underneath it, right? So by the time you rolled all the way over to here today, to this last push up, and you finally looked within a reasonable time frame, right, which was all the way from the morning, that was the biggest push right on top, right? And so to finish off the long line of logic there, right, hey, that's the biggest push. It came right up on top after we've extended 200 ticks off the bottom, right? We're really not going anywhere. Maybe I can put a trade in. Maybe I can put a trade in if we break underneath this, or if I can get a setup in here, maybe I can get a roll to the downside. And at the end of the day, at least to this point, so I thought I might have had it right here. You'll notice that was the biggest push down, and I pretty much knew I was screwed, as I said, once it closed back into that 57 for going back to the other end of the range. But, okay, that is what you want your thinking. So Randy, I couldn't put these pieces together because I didn't have, yesterday in our coaching session, because I couldn't put those various pieces together. I just didn't have the examples to put them together, right? So if you put together our knowledge of how delta waves work, right, how we have key locations at zones where we know we expect rotation and counter rotation, right? And then third piece, that this is something I can't just hand to you and go, hey, this is it, go make money, right? I can hand the zones to you. Those are good locations, right? I go, here's the zones, right? Those are good places to try to pit trades. But the last piece you need is you have to watch whatever market you know well enough so that you know the behavior of the participants in that market, right? You have to know well enough so you understand the behavior of the participants in that market so that you can go and go, oh, this is what usually happens when we get this at this point, right? And that is what generated that trade. As it happens, it's the last day of the month. We always get funky PA. But this will often lead to a massive roll. It just didn't happen. There's one more thing I want to... So does anyone have any questions over that? Number one. As we flutter around into the close and do nothing on NQ or ES. Does anyone have any questions? Was that helpful, guys? I'll post that up to the members' website. Okay, and the trick is getting comfortable entering your trade way off the apex. Randy, any cues before I roll? Over to NQ really quick. Randy, you're typing and then stop typing. So tell me what you're doing. You stop typing. I'll assume there's no question. Okay, so now I want to go over to NQ, and this is just simply covering frustrations that can happen in trading. That's all it is, right? This morning, I pointed out, here's my NQ chart. So here's the 5-minute on NQ. Is that right? Yes. That was today's 5-minute chart, right? If you look at where we opened, I looked at this chart right in here and I said, hey, we're in the yellow zone. we usually reject out of the yellow zone. I'd really like to be short up here. And I had a conflict. Me and Bill have talked about this a lot. Dr. Steenbarger talks about this a lot. Dr. Jeff, who's my trading coach, talks to me about it a lot. Conflicting belief systems that don't allow things to move forward. So it's easiest to give a very harsh example in human relations, right? So let's say you have someone who is a ultra-Orthodox Christian and an ultra-Orthodox Jewish person, and they both have extreme views on their religion, right? Extreme views, right? But they're also both attracted to each other and like each other. They're both very bright. And under any other circumstance, if they had both been the same religion, right, they would both be able to get married and have a wonderful life together. But because just of differing views within their own religious beliefs, even though they match on every other corner, they can't form a union, whether it's because of family or their own personal beliefs or whatever. It just doesn't work, right? Sometimes in trading that happens. I've been smoked in my trading career a lot in the first half hour of the day, right? Now today happened to be a day where there was no econ at the top of the hour, right? And I said in my mind, so we had the 845 CPI number, I think. And then I said, in my mind, I said, you know, that's a great setup. It's not 9 o'clock. And I had to make a decision. And here's where the decision comes. My read was correct. We got a huge rotation down, right down into support out of that. That's important. Okay, my read was correct. I got a setup on every level, on everything that I look at. But, had I taken a stop here, let's say I'd shorted here and it had done this and come up here, I'd have shredded myself internally. Why? Because I've done an audit of my trading, and I know that I have a boatload of losses on trades taken before 9 a.m. For whatever reason in the whole wide world, I'm just not a 70 or 80% trader at that time of day. I either don't have the ability to pick out the good trades from the bad trades, or I'm not warmed up, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not good at that time frame, right? Number one. Number two, when you look at that setup, right, it had everything I freaking wanted on the day. It had, there's my range bars, came over here. I bet my notes are still on it from there. Let's see if I left the arrows or if I erased them. There we go, right? What did that have that looked fantastico? Okay, if we stretch that out, we are pushing into resistance. From the open, back over here, we get the biggest push up. Okay, the only thing this didn't have would have been a speed bar, but we had our last up fractal. We clearly closed behind it. We had two speed bars on top that try to make a push within this biggest push. Here's the base right here. This is the base of my biggest push up, is this bar right here. I'm going to draw a line underneath it, right? Here's my green bars with my downside fractals. I had speed bars to the downside, right? And I got to tell you, it would not have mattered how that set up, because all I was looking at when this was getting ready to trigger, which would have been right on this bar right here. And I pointed out, I said, if you're willing to short here and stop here, that's a great trade. It's 71.16, essentially against 71.23 or 24, and it's a fantastic trade, right? But I'm allergic to 8:30 to 9 o'clock, because the criticism I'll have in my own head of taking a loss at that time of the day will be enormous. Okay, that's a personal issue that I've not been able to overcome, and it's legitimate only because I'll turn off the mic and I'll go, that was stupid, right? I'll get pissed. I won't break anything because I don't do that anymore, but it'll require a couple laps around the building, right? Some deep breathing, and I'll go, that was just not smart, Simon. You took the trade right in front of the algo. You got stopped. You know that's the risk. So I'm just telling you what my internal talk would be. You got stopped. You knew you were likely to get stopped. It was a stupid place to put on a leverage trade on risk, right? So I passed. Now, here's the flip side of the story, right? It worked perfectly. You either could have used this as your trigger right here, stop right there, or this is your trigger right there. Closed underneath the biggest wave up, just like in oil, right? Released. And then what would I would have said here if this one would work? You're going to have to deal with VWAP. See how it cleared VWAP, backside tested, and then really flushed where? Right into support at 70.93. And then, so here's the flip side of that too that affected me, right? And I'm going to go through each step of this. That was a fantastic trade. If I just put on one full-size trade in here, half, 50-60 back, stop on top, full boat, target first VWAP, second target location down over here, right, for the short, I would have ripped, my best scale would have ended up being a 71.16. My first scale would have been around 71.05 area for 10 points, right? And my next trade would have probably been this 70.94 right at the top of this zone, because I'm not going to, even though I think this could break, I'm not positive it can, right? But there's a flip side to that now. Now I'm pissed, right? Because what I said, and I said in the room was, had there been econ, they would have hung it up till 9 o'clock and I would have caught that short, right? So sometimes that happens. Then here's the next step. I want to show you how it crumbled on top of itself. See this over here where we pushed down? And I said, hey, right over here, ES just pushed to the new low. NQ did not, right? So see this when we pushed back up. When we pushed down over here. See when we broke this speed bar right here? Even if I ignored all of this, I knew if we closed back in over here, we were likely to push up. I didn't take the long there. Why? It was right in front of VWAP. And guess what? It was totally correct. But if I followed process, right, I'd have been long, either based on breaking this fractal here or closing back into this fractal, 50-60 back, right, added, stop right down here, and then look at what the net result would have been at the end. Scale and trail, right? And I could have ended up having a very nice day. And then the last piece would have been what? We pushed up all the way up over here. I didn't get any entries. This would have actually been my first short entry. Would have been the close behind this fractal, which would have been this right here on this bar right here. It only would have been a half size and it was way too far away at that point from the apex. It just didn't set up, right? But my whole point behind that was, my entire point behind that was I saw the setup before 9 o'clock. Gut-wise, I thought this trade could work, but my history tells me to wait till after 9 o'clock. I pass on the trade. The trade ends up being the best short side trade all day long. I missed out on the P&L. And then what came in third place? I took a CL short. I didn't cover. I had a couple ticks on it, and I chose not to cover. It came back, and it ran all the way against me and stopped me, right? And because I thought I saw head and shoulders, right? It always looks good till it doesn't, right? I got run over. It looked like news had come out. Whatever sprang it over here on NQ, whoever sprang that sprang CL2. I ended up taking a stop, and it was my only, at that point then, it was my only trade of the day, and it was a larger than normal stop, and it was on full size. I was pissed, right? And so now I'm actually, as y'all saw in the room, I'm actually having to talk myself down. Why? My gut instinct when I get down immediately is to give it back to me immediately. I want my money back, always. And I always want to get green on the day. That's just how I am, right? So I wait. Instead, what did I do? I did not take CL again because CL just simply was, we were just grinding and did not set up. It just didn't set up for me. Hypothetically, I could have shorted it right here, right? But you're talking about 71.17 after it just came off 32 with VWAP underneath. It would have been more. I could have squeezed 10 points out of it. That would have been fine, but I wasn't going to take it. Okay, it's the last day of the month. I ended up getting the CL trade before, right? I did not get up to full size. I did not recover from the down day. But what I did do is I went back, which I just did with y'all, and I replayed how the day would have been perfect. So I only have one decision that I have to go back and make that I would have redone. There's only one thing I would have done differently, right? And that is, I would have said back over here, right? Back over here. Oh, I went back for too many days. That's Monday. Hello, cowboy. Get back on the same day. There you go. I'd have gone back over here and said, I simply have a rule. I don't take trades before 9 a.m. because 8 out of 10 times, that keeps me from getting a stop. That's a rule, right? That's pretty good odds. 8 out of 10 times keeps me out of stops. I'll sacrifice the 20% of the time because I'm not smart enough to recognize when the 20% of the time doesn't work. Now I can go back and examine and say on that rule, if there's no econ data at 9 a.m., is it okay to take that trade? But I'm not going to go through all my data and all my trades and go back through and do the work to figure out, because almost every Thursday, right, we have econ at 9 o'clock. So it's an outlier, right? But what I should have done in my head, and I'll replay it perfectly, is I'll do this, right? I said, if this rolls over, this doesn't fit within my parameters, and then I should have said, that trap back in, or the close behind this fractal right here, is a long for me. We got the biggest push down, and I know if we get above the biggest push down, which occurred right here, right? So I got off process by getting agitated up here. I got off process over here. When we closed above, we simply did a 50-60 back. We never closed behind that 50-60, and it launched to the other end of the range. And I would have, and so what the trade should have ended up looking like, and I would have flipped my day very positive, right? What my day should have ended up looking like is entry at 70.96, right? Add, or let's say more like 7,100, right? Add 70.96 for an average of 70.98, let's call it. The stop would have been at 70.84, 14-point stop. I'd have had to adjust the size for the 4 extra points, right? And then I would have had to be committed. Why wasn't I committed? Because this was a blue zone for me. It gets easily traded through often, and that's what prevented my commitment here. But I should have said, at least on half size, I was willing to take this trade because this was a good setup. And had I done nothing else, I still could have ripped this from approximately 70.96 to 71.04, 8 points, $160 a contract, and said, there, at least I put P&L on the table. Or I could have taken the 50-60 back, right, again, or even the 62 back, right, and said, okay, well, where's the next setup? And if I look at the next setup over here, right, we broke this down fractal. I could have re-entered over here and still ripped it up again, right? And I had another opportunity. See how we closed all the way back? Again, notice we're not getting the fractal pushes to the downside, but see how we closed back in yet again, right? Here, 50-60 back, stop underneath, push to the upside. And then the other piece that was important there, right? Look how big that push is. That delta pushes to the downside at 951, and you can't break the swing low to the left. And you know as soon as you get above that now, right, because they pushed really hard to the downside. Notice on that really hard push, no red speed bars, right? As soon as we close above, bye-bye. So what I've gone through, and I've identified my emotional triggers, right? I've identified where I got frustrated. I identified how I could have made the money just simply following my process through the course of the day without outguessing the PA, right? And then finally I let all the pieces come together, right? So that I could put all, so that, not so that I can't fix today, I'm down, not majorly, minorly, right? And I'm 50% on my trades, which is below my average, right? And I have a way of coming back in tomorrow going, okay, I can improve tomorrow on my quality of execution, right? And I don't have to beat the living crap out of myself on any of this, right? And the last piece is, when you look at how the day laid out on NQ, right? We spent almost the entire day inside of value. And the reason I'm so hard on myself here is the same reason I'm hard on y'all when I coach y'all. I say, if you got stopped a lot in here on NQ, right? We spent the entire day inside of prior day's value. It is hard to get an extension on a product when you spend the whole day inside of value, okay? Inside the prior day's value. On CL, right? We spent the entire day, right? So I'm down on CL, and I try to get an extension where we broke below, and instead of covering right here, which is I think where I got that push down, right? In front of that yellow zone, we actually didn't even make it to the yellow zone. We spent the whole day inside of value, and what happened? I got chopped, right? I never really pulled my P&L back in, and I tried to turn an extension in when we were inside of value. I got chopped. And then if you finally look on ES, which I didn't hook up at all, but if you look at ES, again, we spent almost the entire day in value, and where did we respond? We responded when we came out of value. So I'm going to end that. Can you hold on for me for one moment, please? Sweet. Okay, I will talk to my daughter in just 1 second. Hold on a second. So guys, let me, I'm going to wrap this up. Oh, I forgot to say, because I was going to post this, past performance is not indicative of future results. This is for educational purposes only. As I have demonstrated, you can actually know what you're doing, know what your trade plan is, and still lose money, right? And C, trading inside of value can be frustrating and tough. Your better trades come when you're outside of value on almost every market from the prior session. That's where your better trades come from, right? And so when I look at this day, it's just kind of like blah. Okay, got to go talk to my daughter, guys. Thank y'all for joining. I'm going to end this, and my 2-year-old wants to have a conversation with me, so I'm going to go do that. I will see y'all later.